right now on the Georgia vote.
When you get knocked down, you get back up.
President Joe Biden says he's staying in the race for a second term, but the calls for him to drop out continue. More on the backlash from the Atlanta debate and the latest on this unpredictable campaign.
Also,
we saw President Trump have a resounding victory.
I am standing with my president because he has stood with the American people.
Former Georgia Senator Kelly Loeffler and current Georgia Congresswoman Nikema Williams, each with a take on that debate. And we ask both if they're starting to look ahead to 2026.
And this morning, Democratic strategist Danielle Tuano and GOP strategist Jay Williams sit down for a roundtable.
All right now on the Georgia vote.
From the 11 Alive studios, this is the Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Welcome into the Georgia Vote. It has now been 10 days since the presidential debate right here in Atlanta, but the fallout from President Joe Biden's performance continues.
That's right. On Friday, the president's plan was to address it. He granted an interview to ABC's George Stephanopoulos, and it comes after President Biden's performance on the debate stage against former President Donald Trump. A growing segment of the Democratic Party question whether the president should remain in this race. Some are doing so privately, others publicly. Here's some of that exchange.
But your friend Nancy Pelosi actually framed the question that I think is on the minds of millions of Americans. Was this a bad episode or the sign of a more serious condition?
It's a bad episode. No indication of any serious condition. I was exhausted. I didn't listen to my instincts in terms of preparing, and it was a bad night.
But have you convinced yourself that only you can defeat him?
I convinced myself of two things. I'm the most qualified person to beat him, and I know how to get things done.
If you can be convinced that you cannot defeat Donald Trump, will you stand down?
It depends if the Lord Almighty comes down and tells me that, I might do that.
The second presidential debate is scheduled for September 10th. ABC is the host network, but no word yet on the format, the location, or the choice of moderators.
While President Biden grapples with the impact from his performance on the Atlanta debate stage, other prominent Democrats are now being forced to evaluate his viability as a candidate. On Wednesday, we sat down with Georgia's Nikema Williams. She is the Democratic congresswoman representing her constituents here in Atlanta. She's also the chair of the state Democratic Party and asked her whether President should stay in the race. Many people have voiced concerns, including some within the Democratic Party, about President Biden's performance at the Atlanta debate. Do you think President Joe Biden should stay in the race for the presidency?
So, look, Zach, we all saw the debate. And in real time, if you would have been around me, I had to go and watch it in my room. And I'm glad that I did, because there are moments when I was like answering questions for myself and yelling at the TV because it was not a good night. And we were all concerned about what we saw on Thursday night. But what I know is that President Biden's 3.5 years of accomplishments as president, lowering the unemployment rate, getting people back to work. I have an 8-year-old son who started kindergarten in front of a computer screen. Carter was able to go to school in person because of the work that President Biden did in his administration to get COVID under control and get people back to work, get our children back to school. And I'm a third-generation HBCU grad. $16 billion for HBCUs in this country. So there's no disputing what has happened over the last 3.5 years with our president. Over 90 minutes of a debate, 3.5 years as president, and then we have the alternative, which is Donald Trump. Donald Trump failed this country during the pandemic, and I mean, he's the same person who said he would be a dictator on day one of his presidency. So we have a clear choice. Right now, President Biden is the only person who can make the decision if he is going to remain in this race. And as long as President Biden is at the top of this ticket, I am standing with my president because he has stood with the American people time and time again. My mission is clear. We must defeat Donald Trump.
I think some viewers may hear you say that and hear you talk about the last 3.5 roughly years of the Biden administration, and they may say, some of them, okay, fair enough. But some of those viewers may also say they watched the debate as well. The president is now 81 years old. If he is elected to a second term, he'll be 86 at the end of that second term.
Some people are worried that that is just too old to be president. What do you say to viewers who have those concerns?
Zach, Donald Trump is old too. They're both senior men. And that is what's on the table. But then you look at the policies, because they're both old, and you think about the lies that Trump told over and over on the debate stage, taking credit for other people's work. He took credit for reducing the cost of insulin, which our senator right here in Georgia led that initiative. And he wasn't even president when that was ushered through. So we look at the policies that will be enacted that will impact Americans' lives every day, because at the end of the day, they're both senior gentlemen. They're both running to lead their respective parties. And it comes down to me of the policies that will impact our lives. We have one person who is looking to divide our country, take us back to a dark time, and seeking retribution for his political enemies. And then we have someone else who is really looking out for the future of this country. I have an 8-year-old. Every decision that I make has to be looked at through the lens of what is best for future generations, because my Carter cakes, he's counting on us. Viewers want to know, how are we going to move this country forward? And that is making sure that we defeat Donald Trump.
Is President Joe Biden the best person to make that happen?
President Biden is our Democratic nominee, and I am standing with our ticket. And as long as he is on the ballot, he is our Democratic nominee, and I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that he's reelected.
That wasn't quite the question I asked, though. Is Joe Biden the best person to do that?
So elections are about a contrast. We only won Georgia by 11,780 votes. So we understand that it was going to be an uphill battle either way, and we're going to have to bring our case to the voters. Democrats have delivered over and over again. So we have a story to tell, and I'm willing to tell that story between now and November, and the voters will have the final say in November.
You can watch our full conversation right now on our website. Just look for this story on 11alive.com. And still ahead, the view from the Republican side. We go one-on-one with Kelly Loeffler, former senator and a major player in Georgia Republican politics. We talk about the debate and her potential political future.
And later, a formerly incarcerated Gwinnett County man is grateful for the chance to cast his ballot. He tells us why in this week's Voice of the Voter.
As the Atlanta debate and all that has followed it has made very clear to anyone who perhaps still was not paying attention, Georgia once again playing a starring role in the national political universe. This week, we sit down with Republican former U.S. Senator Kelly Loeffler to discuss the state of the race for the White House and her potential political future.
In 2021, you started an organization that promotes GOP turnout, Greater Georgia. You've been making more public appearances recently, including in interviews like this one. Do you plan to run for office again in 2026?
Well, I'm not a politician, and certainly anyone talking about 2026 is doing a huge disservice to our state and our country. We have to be laser focused on the job at hand right now in November 24, and it's going to take that work every day. It's why I'm talking to you during a holiday week. I mean, we are working literally every day, and that's my mission, is to grow the conservative movement. It's why I started Greater Georgia. I could have gone back to the private sector. I was blessed by success and a 30-year career there. Again, not being a politician, I don't think about a political future. I think about winning, and winning up and down the ballot. And that's what Greater Georgia does. We focus on everything from state to local to hopefully providing a blueprint for conservative mobilization across this country.
I just want to be clear here. You didn't say no when we just asked you that question. Are you considering a run?
Well, look, I've never foreclosed opportunities in my entire life. I'm from a farm in a small town, and I never thought I would ever have the success I've had in my life to serve in the U.S. Senate and now to serve as the leading conservative and Republican donor in the state of Georgia. I never thought those things would happen. I got there by not foreclosing any opportunities or taking risks or opportunities that might come along.
So it sounds like not ruling it out, but keeping the focus on 2024.
Not even thinking about it right now.
We had a big debate in Georgia on Thursday. What's your biggest takeaway?
Well, the biggest takeaway that we have, obviously, is that this is something that the entire world is now talking about. We saw President Trump have a resounding victory, but we also saw President Biden did not even meet the low bar and receive the participation trophy for standing for 90 minutes that everyone expected him to be able to do after literally a week of vacation and preparation, hundreds of days of vacation during his presidency to rest and recover between trips, and couldn't really even define his winning policies or a vision, or even articulate his basic views on issues that our country is confronted with every single day, that Georgia's voters are feeling, from the economy to our national security threats to an open border. And I think Americans are rightly concerned about the national security threat that this now poses to our country, for the entire world to see the lack of strength represented in our commander-in-chief.
Do you think President Biden should drop out of this race?
Look, that's going to be up to Democrats. It's going to be up to President Biden. There's obviously a growing and vigorous conversation going on about that. It appears that we are seeing the unraveling of the Biden-Harris administration. Whether the next administration includes Kamala Harris, that remains to be seen. But right now, there's a conversation going on, whether it's within donors, whether it's within the White House, Congress, and even the local media here, where the Atlanta Journal-Constitution has come out and said that President Biden should not run for another term.
Now, former President Trump is also pushing 80 years old himself. Do you have concerns that his age will impede his ability to successfully carry out a second term if he's elected?
President Trump was strong, vigorous, presidential, and visionary on the stage the other night. I have zero concerns. I know President Trump well. I know his energy levels. In fact, I think the whole country sees it. He's out on the road doing rallies, events, fundraisers. He's heavily engaged every single day in various policies. He's talking to families who've lost loved ones due to the open borders that Biden and Kamala Harris have allowed to happen under their administration. So I think what Americans are seeing, that President Trump is at the top of his game. He has policies that will lift up the American people. And I think there's zero concerns about his health. And I think that conversation is a distraction from the bigger issues, that the Biden administration simply doesn't have the policy, the vigor, or the direction to lead the American people back to making our country safe, strong, and secure.
We covered a lot of ground there, but there is still more to that interview. If you want to see the full conversation, look for the story right now on 11alive.com.
And still ahead, we hear from the voice of the voter. But first, Danielle Tuano and Jay Williams dissect all of the latest developments in the race for the White House and its impact on Georgia. That's coming up next in our roundtable. You're watching the Georgia Vote. Welcome back. Today we have two new contributors sitting at our political roundtable. Republican strategist Jay Williams is the founder and managing principal of the Stone Ridge Group. Some of the clients he's directly worked for include former Georgia Governor Nathan Deal, former presidential candidate Nikki Haley, and the Republican Party of Georgia. And Danielle Tuano is currently communications director for the Gwinnett County Young Democrats. She's also CEO for Premier Publishing Group. Thank you both so much for joining us. Welcome to panel.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate having both of you here. Danielle, let's start with this. The big topic on everybody's minds is the continued fallout from the Atlanta presidential debate. Where do you see the presidential race standing right now, and does President Joe Biden stay on this ticket moving forward?
Absolutely, he stays on the ticket. There is a bit of worrisome going on in Atlanta about his ability to stay in the position or as a candidate on the ballot. But as Dems, we are going to support and elect our president, and that's President Joe Biden.
And Jay, for a more Republican perspective on that, do you agree? Do you think President Biden stays on the ticket, or do you think in the coming days we'll see a change?
I mean, I think you're going to see a new nominee by September.
Really?
I think the Democrats are incredibly disciplined at staying together and keeping a straight face. The fact is, you're already seeing cracks in that just days after a debate. I think he's gone. I think everybody knows he's gone. I think it's just a matter of time and him getting his head around it himself.
Danielle, you work with Young Dems. They are a primary voting bloc. The Democrats want that vote. If the president were to step down, have you any names that the young people are throwing out your way that they would want to see on that ticket?
Unfortunately, there haven't been any names that we've thrown out because we are going to remain united on the front of supporting President Biden. I think what needs to happen is that he needs to repeat the success that he had in 2020, specifically in Cobb County and Gwinnett County, with making sure that he reaches out in messaging to those suburban moderates, as well as the Black and brown voters and young voters like myself as well.
And Jay, I want to ask you, the Republican strategy here. I mean, we've seen former President Donald Trump tweet on his Truth Social coming after the president. I mean, it's after his performance. We've all seen it, right?
Yeah.
But moving forward, what is the Republican strategy? Is he just going to sit back and kind of let the Democrats do what they're going to do?
Well, if he's smart, he will. He'll let them eat themselves alive and figure that out. I mean, the problem is you've really only got one person I think could come out of that chaos and really give Donald Trump a run for his money at this point. I think that's Michelle Obama. I think everybody else is going to run behind Donald Trump. So I think if they're wise, they'll be quiet. And I mean, not that President Trump would be quiet, but I think that they'll just wait and lie in wait till they figure out what they're going to do.
Y'all have both been in Georgia politics for a long time now. You're seasoned experts. Let's just zoom out for a moment. I'm dying to hear your thoughts on just where we are, whether President Biden stays on the ticket or not. You two both have expressed different views on how this is going to play out. But the sheer fact that we're having this conversation at all. Danielle, did you ever expect to see a political moment like the one that we're in?
Yeah.
Well, absolutely not. I feel like there are individuals who are worried about the performance from both candidates from the presidential debate. There were moments in the debate where the answers were problematic. We've seen President Biden fail to articulate a few of his points, but we also seen former President Trump deflect from a lot of the questions that was given to him. Excuse me. So with that being said, clearly he's a problematic candidate. And so we have decided as Dems to continue to support and elect the most qualified, caring, and politically intelligent candidate, and that's going to be President Joe Biden.
And Jay, Georgia is going to play a key role in this race as we move towards November. On the Georgia Vote, we always want to focus on Georgia-specific issues. No matter who the candidates are come November, what are going to be the top two issues that both candidates are going to have to focus on here in Georgia?
Well, I mean, economy is always going to be number one. I mean, absolutely number one. But immigration, I think, is going to be a huge issue. I think it's a huge concern to voters. I think middle-of-the-road voters, Republican voters, are very concerned about what's going on at the border right now. And I think those two issues are going to be the ones that drive the election here, at least in Georgia.
I want to ask you both, looking ahead to 2026, if we can talk about it. We both saw former Senator Loeffler's answer, or not answer, to Zach when he asked her about it.
She's not foreclosing it, right?
Not foreclosing it, and a couple of other people, Congressman Buddy Carter, Jason
Carter as well, the grandson of Jimmy Carter, all not saying no to a run, right?
So what would you, who would you all like to see in those seats come 2026? We still have a lot of time. Danielle, we'll start with you.
Well, that's a very interesting question. 2026, I don't really have anyone in mind right now. I think that that's a decision that voters will make when the time presents itself.
Perhaps Senator Warnock?
Perhaps Senator Warnock or Ossoff, maybe. We'll see. Credit to them that Georgia is a battleground and current legitimate swing state. Yeah. So it will be very interesting to see if they will make a run for governor.
And Jay, real quick here, just a couple seconds we have left.
Oh, well, I definitely think it's going to be Loeffler. Obviously going to be Burt Jones. Could be somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, maybe another congressman.
All right. We'll see.
2026, far away, but sometimes feeling not so far away.
Not so
we wish
far.
we could talk more. We've got to wrap it up here, though. But up next, our voice of the voter highlights a pastor from Lawrenceville who now has his voting rights restored. Stay with us.
Each week, we are going to where you are to hear in your own words what matters to you most this election year. And so today, our voice of the voter takes us to Gwinnett County. We talk with Q.J. Thomas, an openly transgender man and convicted felon who now has his voting rights restored.
Everybody in this picture is deceased except for my Uncle Gary. This is my beautiful fiance's family. These are my children. These were my children's ages when I became incarcerated. So this is my daughter, Dominique. This is my daughter, Cheyenne. She was 2. This is my youngest son, Hunter. He was 6 months old, and this is my oldest son, Japheth, and he was 6. So my kids were 6 months, 2, 4, and 6 when I became incarcerated. I am originally from Canton, Ohio. I migrated to the state of Georgia on a 4-year basketball scholarship to Albany State University. I was hanging around some guys that were thugs or gangbangers, and I was charged with armed robbery, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm, and I was sentenced to 29 years in the Georgia State Penitentiary system. I was released in February 2015, and the first time I was able to vote was November 2018.
What is your kind of thought going into November politically? How are you feeling?
It's weird. And it's actually emotional for me because Trump is painted in this big light, negative for some. Some he's the savior because of the economy. I don't try to judge people, but I feel that it is extremely unethical and immoral that a convicted felon can run for the president of the world, but a convicted felon as myself or some of my previously incarcerated sisters and brothers, and they don't have any rights, freedom, or liberty, living as a African-American transgender male in the state of Georgia. Thank God for some of the laws that have protected me and some of my transgender care. Also being a pastor, I'm a founding pastor here in Atlanta, Georgia. It has not been accepted, and I want to try to be a light and an open door for other LGBTQI people, ex-felons, in our African-American community to say nothing or nobody should withhold or keep you from being who you want to be and who you know you need to be.
Do you know yet who you're going to vote for in November?
Absolutely. I'm Team Blue, Democrat all day, unjustifiably. There's such a just fairness about President Biden that I would feel safe and comfortable with for my future.
And then are there any specific policies that you're looking at that you want to either make law or see something change going into November?
Absolutely. This whole thing with ex-felons and cons, I feel like that law should be changed because if I am good enough to pay taxes, if I'm good enough to pay bills, I should be good enough to vote.
We always like to end on a positive note. So if I can ask you, looking ahead to November, what are you optimistic about?
I hope and pray that the person that is elected for president will cater to every community, every person, every being, so that we all can live in peace and harmony.
Wow, talk about somebody whose life has had so many layers. What a remarkable story, Faith.
And Q wanted to make sure that those who have served their time know that there is a pathway to vote again. You just have to dig a little bit.
Well, we appreciate you watching us today. We hope you see us back here next Sunday at 11 for another edition of the Georgia Vote.